Hello, welcome to Puzzle Master. Today I'm going to be showing you the solution for the Hanayama Quartet puzzle, which means I'm going to show you all the special moves that are required to separate those four individual pieces into individual pieces, and then I'm going to show you how you can reassemble them back into their original quartet form. Now the quartet is a level 6 out of a possible 6 on the Hanayama difficulty scale, and it is a level 10 out of 10 on the Puzzle Master difficulty scale. And if you don't already have the quartet puzzle, then you can pick it up from our website puzzlemaster.ca. And without further ado, let's crack on with that solution. Okay, so here we have a fully assembled quartet puzzle. Before we get into it, we just need to distinguish between the two different sets of squares. I know they're not squares, but I'm going to call them squares because it's easier. So the difference between the squares is where the gaps are. So you'll notice that in here, the gaps are at the acute angle of the square, as opposed to these ones, which are at an obtuse angle. So we're going to be mainly holding and focusing on the ones with the acute angle. Now, what we're going to do requires extremely precise movements, and I'll describe them as best as I can and I'll show you them as best as I can, but it is going to take a little bit of practice to get them in the right position. So first of all, we want to hold the acute angle squares in this position, and we want the gap in the obtuse angles to be in this position here. And what we're going to do is we're going to open up the acute angle square, and here is the first move is the toughest, the most precise, the most awkward, I guess is another good description of it. And I'm going to try and move them into a position where we don't need to be, but it's easier for you to see where we are. So in here we have opened up this gap in the acute angles, and what we've done is drop this left hand bottom corner of this obtuse angle square into that groove. We don't need to come in any further. If we come in further with this piece into this gap, then we can't do the next move. It just needs to be a little dip of that corner into that position, and what that allows us to do is bring its partner square up and over the top and around the corner. So we just dropped that little corner in, and that gives us enough space to turn this piece around that corner. We can then close the acute angle squares into this position, and the next move, we're going to be moving this piece here, and we're going to be doing two moves in one. We're going to be rotating it and twisting it around this corner at the same time. So what we're going to do is we rotate and twist, and it is as simple as that. It's a very, very slight move from here to here. There shouldn't be any resistance, and that is the tricky moves done already. What we can then do is take the piece on the left and rotate it anti-clockwise, and from there it's just a case of simply separating the squares. So now we untangle those two squares, so we end up in this position here. And what we can do then to make it easy is just lay them flat on the floor and untangle three different sets of squares at the same time. So we won that one over that one. We can then go whichever way we want, really. We come, which one should we do? So this bottom corner, we can untangle there. And then all we have to do is separate those two pieces there, and then separate those two pieces there, and we separate those two pieces from there. And that is the simplest solution to the quartet puzzle. And for reassembling the quartet puzzle, the first thing we need to do is match up squares that don't match up. So for instance, we want an acute angle square with an obtuse angle square. So if you put them together, they shouldn't match up. Now what we're going to do is we're going to arrange these in a position that makes the next few moves a little bit easier to do, or a lot easier to do. What we want to do is connect the two pieces, and we want to keep the acute angle piece facing the opposite one. Here is one I made earlier. What we need to do with the obtuse angle one is turn it up into this position so that we are sort of in the furthest corner away from the actual opening of the acute angle piece. The next few moves are a series of crossing over and reconnecting of each piece. There's 3 initial ones and then one final one which is very easy to do. The first one is also very easy to do. We simply just slide these 2 pieces together in here. The next 2 start to look a little bit more complicated with which piece is crossing over which. But it's essentially the same movement twice now. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this acute angle square piece and we're going to go over this obtuse angle square piece into here. Again, looks a little bit more complicated now, and then we're going to take the opposite 2 pieces, the 2 pieces we haven't just used, this acute angle, this obtuse angle, and we cross those over as well. Once you've done that, you can then actually reassemble those 2 acute angle pieces into this position, so we get a little bit more order back in how it looks. And what we're then going to do is we can pick up the puzzle and we're going to focus on doing those 2 first moves that we did to separate it, which are much more complicated. But first of all, we're going to reconnect these 2 pieces. We're going to cross over here, and then all we're going to do is rotate the piece on the left clockwise into there. What we're going to then do is the first of the 2 more complicated moves, which is 2 moves in 1 to start with. So we're going to turn this piece around this corner, and we're going to rotate it clockwise as we're looking at it at the same time. So we come around that corner and into that position there. That shouldn't cause you any trouble whatsoever. That is a very, very simple move. There's plenty of room for it to happen. There shouldn't be any force involved in that. Now our aim is to turn this piece back around to this corner here, but we have to do it with this left hand corner dropping into the gap here, if you remember. So what we need to do first is open up that gap in the 2 acute pieces, and again it's much easier to see when you're doing it in reverse. So that bottom left hand corner is just dropping into that little square groove in there. That gives us enough space to turn around that corner with this piece. That one doesn't take force, but it might need a slight little click. And then we're immediately back where we started, and we have managed to reassemble the quartet puzzle. As easy as that. Okay, so there it is. That is how you take those 4 pieces apart, and that is how you put them back together. The challenge with this one is those first initial 2 moves. The putting that little bottom left hand corner of the square into that little space so that you can pass the other piece over the top of it is amazingly, or has to be amazingly perfect. But when you are in that perfect position, it's like it's effortless in terms of how it actually glides over that piece. And the same thing for then this next move, which is that sort of rotate and turn around the corner with the opposite piece. Once you've done those 2 moves, it's then simply a case of untangling, uncrossing each 4 pieces. There's 4 sort of crossovers in total. It gets a little bit more complicated when you're putting it back together, trying to spot which piece is which and which bit needs to cross over with which other piece. But for a very, very difficult puzzle, I find that this solution is relatively simple and sort of nice and easy to follow along to, and hopefully you found that the case just now. So there we go. If you want to get more puzzles like the quartet puzzle, then you should check out our website puzzlemaster.ca, where we have the biggest variety of puzzles on the internet in the world. And until next time, I will see you later.